Solo Leveling is one of the best stories I've ever read that has some of the most flaws that I've seen in something that I like. Because usually when a story has this many flaws, I would think, oh, I won't like that series. Some disclaimers, I'm talking about the webtoon, not the web novel. So I'm going to be talking about all the side stories and kind of going through all the spoilers. So that's your spoiler warning. To start, I think Solo Leveling is extremely good. It's really good, and I think a great analogy for Solo Leveling is it's a double-edged dagger. You know, it has some things that really elevate it, but those same things that elevate it, I think, bring it down. So I'm going to break up this video into those ideas that I think are really good, and then how those ideas also bring the series down. The first concept of Solo Leveling that's really good is the concept itself. I think that's what drew me in initially, and I think a lot of readers. The concept is pretty simple. You know, you had a normal world, and suddenly gates came in that had monsters, and normal everyday people awoken as hunters. And the twist is, everyone who's a hunter, your rank is predetermined. When you awaken, whatever rank you get, you know, you're done. You know, your hierarchy in this society has been set. So obviously it sets up the cool power fantasy idea of the main character being able to actually level up, to being able to actually get stronger while the world kind of stays stagnant. And I think it's a really cool concept, and it had a lot of like potential in like really the intricacies. You know, you needed like to understand how gates worked. There were all different types of gates. There were double dungeons. Each gate had like different things that could happen in them. Sometimes when you would see, oh, this is a weak gate, it can become a stronger gate. And you needed like a whole party. So like, at least for me, I thought it was very interesting to see on the ground level, like kind of how the economy or the world worked in tackling these gates. You know, you had these guilds, you had the government, and you had a bunch of different countries. You know, it's a new world and everyone's adapting to it. And I thought that concept was extremely interesting. I think the concept itself also becomes a double-edged dagger. And what I mean by that is the good things about it also drag the series down. Like, I thought it was very interesting that this concept of your rank is predetermined, your hierarchy is predetermined. So it's very interesting to see how, you know, people from different hierarchies, like different ranks, how they function. You know, how does a B rank function in a guild? Are there guilds that maybe only really have B ranks? You know, they talked about there was this other guild that only had A ranks, but since they had the most A ranks, they were able to capitalize a lot of that market because, you know, you don't just need S ranks. You know, you could have a bunch of A ranks and that should be enough to just get all the gates that are really, really hard. And they really didn't really explore that. And another thing that they kind of really played up was your rank is predetermined. So all the training you want to do, it doesn't matter. But if training doesn't matter, then why in the show itself we see everyone training? It's just kind of weird. And I see, you know, everyone's headcanon is like, oh, well, they're just doing it to hone their abilities or to maybe learn new techniques. Well, if you're doing that, doesn't that mean you're getting stronger? Like, doesn't that kind of defeat the purpose of this setting up this premise that, you know, what you have is predetermined? Well, it seems like you can actually affect a little bit of it. So, you know, like, is that just, has no one really tried to like train to go up? You know, maybe it's marginal and that's why no one does it. But I would have really liked to see that idea explored. Like maybe people could have started like developing like drugs and stuff to get stronger or something. But, you know, they did play around with it a little bit where like, oh, if you could buy the best gear, you get stronger. But they kind of threw away that really quickly. And we kind of saw, I mean, that was kind of useless. You know, we saw like the best friend Jin-ho of the main character. He had all this like best gear and everyone like, oh, that's why he's so strong. But that was played for a very short amount of time. And we kind of just get stuck with this half-baked power system. That sounds interesting from the premise where, you know, your power is predetermined. But then why is everyone training? It's just, I kind of have to like be like, oh, that's just oversight. Which I think is, I wouldn't want to do that in a story that I personally think is very good. And I think it has a lot of merit. And I, you know, rank it high esteem, which is why I would criticize it on that level. And another thing about it is with the main character and the main premise of the show being that the main character can level up, I think that happens way too quickly. I think that him being able to level up was a very cool concept, but then execution-wise, I think it was done not as well as it could have. We kind of only see rank E, and then we kind of just skip to rank S. Because he gets way too powerful, way too quick. And we don't really get to explore the intricacies of, like, how do rank B, operate in this world? How do rank C's operate? How do rank A's operate? We had this cool idea that, there was a guild that had no S ranks, but had a bunch of A ranks. It had like the most in South Korea. And that was very interesting to see, how did they monopolize the market? What's their like market in that world? And we don't really get to explore that. We kind of just follow Jinwoo as he goes from basically E rank. All right, yeah, now I got this stealth ability. Now I'm S rank. And I think it moves way too quickly. And we don't get to explore that in between, which I think had a lot of potential. Because, what happens when there's like a mixing of, maybe some people, sometimes raids have B ranks and C ranks and A ranks. We don't really get that. We saw a little bit at the end where we saw the dynamics of these raids, where we had like in the larger guilds, you had miners, you had the haulers that came in after, you had the secondary team. Like I thought that stuff was very interesting, but I don't think it was really explored enough. It was set up, I think, well, but then we never really got to dive deep. It was just a bunch of stuff that we just don't know about the world. And I think that's a really shame, because I thought the world was pretty cool, and I thought the concept was very interesting. The next idea that I thought was really, really cool that the story did was the world building. I thought the world building was interesting. I wanted to learn more about the world. I thought it was strategically done well to introduce the national level hunters after, Jinwoo was strong enough. Now that it's like, oh wow, there's an actual higher level. And you also had these like really interesting dynamics in the world where, South Korea is kind of small. We thought South Korea was like the strongest. No. Like the US is like just as strong. If not stronger. We have Japan, like they're extremely strong. You had China, they have national level hunters. Korea, they don't have any. So it was very interesting to see how like, how could that play into the story? Like now there's a lot of politics going on where, you literally see these countries coming to recruit Jinwoo, and you're like, how is this going to play into the politics of things? And then you had like these interesting, to add to the mystique of the world, you had like, there's hunters, but then there's like these magical hunters that like Madame Selner, she could like predict the future. She can awaken hunters, which is a crazy idea. She could do a double awakening on hunters. And you had all these interesting, cool ideas that made the world feel like, wow, it's actually huge. It's a big world out there, and we don't really know the extent of all the world. We only see a very small snippet of it that the author is showing us. So, you want to learn more about the world. But I think that itself kind of sets up the double-edged dagger, in the world building itself. In that when you really kind of look back on it, everything was kind of used to just hype up Jinwoo. You had these national level hunters that you thought, oh wow, they're actually gonna, be really, really strong. But they're just used to hype up Jinwoo, the main character, which kind of ties back to the idea before where it kind of moves too quickly. Like Thomas Andre, the big American dude, like he was like, he's like the man, he's a number one, And so it's a weird thing they do, because after he gets beat up, they make like a statement like, there's only two men who could beat up Thomas, who could beat up a national level hunter like that. One of them is you, and the other one is in the hospital. It's like, well, that's okay. Well, now the power level is just screwed. Now we have like a My Hero Academia situation where this like 12-year-old Deku is now the strongest man in the world. So everything is kind of just used to the detriment, I think, to Jinwoo. Like you build up this really cool world and this really cool political system, and everything's used for Jinwoo. Even Madame Selner, she was literally used. She was created as this really interesting, like, twist. Like, oh wow, there's so much mystique in this world. This is unique hunter. And she was literally used as just to show, oh yeah, Jinwoo's like above everyone else. And it's like, what? Really? That's it? She's kind of useless. Like, she's literally just used to show how strong Jinwoo is. And I think that was just a waste. I think there was so much more you could have done with that concept, or just introduce more characters like Madame Selner who weren't just straight fighters or healers or tanks, you know? And, I mean, don't get me started, the German guy from the National Level Hunter, he was literally used as fodder. Like, it was actually crazy. It was crazy we saw him used as legitimate fodder towards the end of the series, where we saw him, he was like really hyped up. And then we just see him during the fight with the Monarchs. He's like, oh, I'm about to fight. And then Thomas Andre steps in front of him and like just pushes him out of the way. It's like, well, Thomas Andre was already used as fodder to hype up Jinwoo. Now you're going to even reduce the other guy? Like, what was the point of introducing these cool characters if they were just going to be thrown away to hype up Jinwoo? You know, it reminds me of a Dragon Ball GT issue where everything's about Goku. Here, everything's about Jinwoo, and I think it's to the detriment of the story because, you know, how can I like all these characters if they're just, like, fodder? And like, the one of the National Hunters that was hyped up a lot that wasn't used as fodder was Liu, the Chinese National Hunter, and he was even shown, like, with a lot of hype, like, oh, like, during the raid in Japan and Shinjuku where all the giants came out, Jinwoo killed them all, but a giant escaped off the shore and went to China, and Liu was able to kill him, you know, and it showed, like, that really cool, like, frame of Liu just, like, easily dispatching of the giant, and it's like, oh, wow, we're gonna set up a really cool character in the future, but then he doesn't do anything. He, like, actually does nothing. He looks scary as hell. He looks pretty cool. His character design is pretty cool. But I don't even think we see him fight at all. And it was just like, why? Is everyone just here to hype up Jinwoo? Is he the GOAT? Clearly is. And I think that's a shame in that you build up this cool world just to not use any of it and use it all just for Jinwoo. All the countries are to his whim. All the national hunters are to his whim. It's just a lot of wasted potential. The next concept about soul leveling that I think is really good is the characters itself. They make you really care about the characters because, to me, I really enjoyed learning and seeing all these characters interact with each other. You know, you had some really cool ones like the chairman. You had Jinho, the best friend of the main character. You had Cha, the future love interest of the main character. You know, you obviously had the national level hunters. I thought they were very, very interesting, and I think it speaks to how good this show is in the fact that we want to know more about them. You know, we want, you know, the screen to cut off from Jinwoo, and we want to learn about all the other characters. And I think this is where the double-edged dagger comes in, where it kind of sucks that we have all these characters that we really like and we want to know more about, but they're just not used, like, at all. Like, we had so many throwaway characters, like, for example, the sister. Like, she's literally pretty useless. Like, in the whole story, you know, Jinwoo's like, oh, it's about family. But after, like, he saves his mom, there's really no story left between him and his sister and his mom. You know, it's just kind of thrown away to the winds. It's a very side story, which I think is a lot of waste because you want to learn more about, you know, all these characters. Like, even the, I forgot the name, but his sister had, like, this best friend in high school who ended up joining his guild in the beginning. Like, she's just thrown away. Everyone's thrown away. And it's because they kind of went too fast. So they couldn't really incorporate them into the story, which I think is a shame. You also have these, like, weird choices where Junhee, like, the red hair girl that was there from day one, the B rank healer. You know, you would think, oh, that's, like, a typical love interest that's going to be the main character, but she's just thrown away instantly. Like, it's very strange to see, like, oh, wow, you set up this cool character, you set up this person who liked him from the beginning, who didn't care about whether he was weak or strong, just like, oh, yeah, she gone, she retired. It's like, okay, well, you know, she retired, but she can still be in the story. But we don't really see much about her anymore. And I think that's just like a waste. You make this great character, you have this cool, you know, story with these cool characters, and you kind of throw them away. And I think that's like a shame. You know, don't even get me started. Like, when they created the guild, they needed a third member, but instead of putting Cha in, which I think would have been perfect to, increase the dynamics of the characters because they were very likable, they just threw in this random cousin who had the purple hair as the third member, which is very strange because it was literally used as just like a one-panel gag that showed like Cha being like very jealous. It's like, okay, well, what was the point of that? We actually don't see her ever again. Apparently she's a celebrity, but we don't see her ever again. So, like, what was her purpose? Like, what was even the point of this idea of, oh, you need 3 guild members? That concept wasn't explored at all. A lot of these characters were just thrown away to the wind. And at the end of the day, it was literally just Jinwoo. It was just about the main character. Even though you had all these side characters that I thought were very likable, the side characters were kind of thrown away just to focus on Jinwoo, which I thought was, that I think that could have been done better. Because I personally like this world and I like the characters and I wanted to learn more about them. Another thing that I really, really like about Solo Leveling is it does things differently than I've seen from other shows and stories, where it doesn't just follow traditional tropes. Like, for example, I think in other stories, the Huang story where the Jinwoo, he killed the brother, so then his older brother, who is like an S rank, is gonna murder him. I think that would have been played up. And I thought that wasn't yet played up in this story, but it really wasn't, which I actually enjoyed. It was actually nice. I when I saw that, I'm like, oh, it's obvious what's going to happen. This guy's going to like kidnap his, sister or something. And he's going to have to fight him. And once he fights him, then he'll become S rank, because it's like, oh my God, this E rank just beat a S rank. But that was thrown away, which I actually liked. I'm like, oh wow, I didn't expect them to just not really focus on that storyline too much. I thought that was interesting. They also had like the red hair guy who was like part of the biggest guild. Like he was talking to his like main guy, and he was like, we gotta recruit this guy because like he's like stronger than you. He's like, I can't even beat I'm called the strongest weapon in the world, but I can't beat A rank gate all by myself, while this guy can. And I really like that idea where, this world where these people are OP, they're OP, but it's like practical. It's practical, like overpoweredness, Of course, he can't just solo a whole gate by himself, You need like a team. But then this comes into its own double-edged dagger in that you do things differently, but sometimes it's to the detriment. Like, for example, the Jeju Island raid, like that was played up as, oh, it's this crazy thing. But it just kind of seemed like it was just there for just to hype up Jinwoo again. Like, first, it was just weird that Jinwoo didn't go in the first place. I have read online that I can see the concept of he didn't want to, leave because his family, just came back together and he didn't want to, he thought they could handle it. But it just seemed like, that just seems like a plot device because, as we see, he's so overpowered, he could teleport. Why not just go? Why not just go in there, sweep it real quick, and then come back? Because what ended up happening was just, all right, well, now a bunch of people just die. And it's like, what was the point of just letting those people die? You're going to save the day at the end of the day, but why do we let those people die in the first place? And yeah, that raid was just like, it was like a joke. It was literally just to hype up Jinwoo, like a lot of things in the story. Everyone was weak as hell, except for Jinwoo, which he came in and he soloed everything. And it also kind of breaks the story when Jinwoo can do everything by himself. Because it makes sense, because he's like the Necromancer and Shadow Monarch and whatever. But I think they could have at least played it a little bit in the beginning where he can't solo everything. Like, even the very beginning, he was going to like all the C rank dungeons and D rank dungeons, and he was already soloing. And at that point, he just had high strength. It was like, oh well, what the hell? Like, I don't know if the other people could do that. I don't know if an A rank could just solo everything in those lower level things. And also, it's like conveniently every single time he went into these dungeons, they all became like these double dungeons, which I guess you could just play that up to like the fate of the world and him being chosen as a player. But it was just very weird where, they had this really cool concept going where, there's a balance in this world where everyone needs to have a team and whatnot, even if they're super strong. And he kind of breaks that balance. but I think that could have been done a little bit better. It was also very weird with the dad situation where he just kind of like disappeared. Like he he saves him from the monarchs, and then while he's hugging him, just like disappears. It was like I don't really see the point of that. So they do things a little bit differently here, and sometimes I think it works well, like the Huang story, but then other times it just feels like kind of half baked, and it's just like kind of thrown in there, and you don't really feel anything from it, even though you want to, because it's a really cool story, like the Jeju Island raid, or the fact that he doesn't need a team, or even in the beginning part, like later on it makes more sense, but even the beginning part he was soloing anyways. And just like the dad, it was really weird where the dad is like, I was chosen to protect you, and then he protects him, and now he disappears the moment he meets his son. I thought that was a very strange thing that they could have done differently. So it might sound like I don't like solo leveling, but I think it's really the opposite. The fact that I want to talk about solo leveling, I think shows that I really like this series. Like I really enjoyed my time reading Solo Leveling. And I think the reason why I talk about it is because I just wish it was more. Like I just want to explore the world more. I remember when I first finished it like a few years ago, we didn't have these side stories. So it felt even more empty. At least now the side stories, it's actually pretty cool to see a resolution. And I thought that was cool to see him have a son and all that. But even still, I feel like there was so much more about the world that we didn't get to know. And it's just so interesting. And there's so many things that I want to know about the world. And I think that just shows how good of a job the author did in creating this really cool story, these really cool concepts, and these really cool characters that I actually care about. You know, at the end of the day, it's all fake. You know, it's all like a made up fiction. But the fact that I care to talk about it, and clearly a lot of people care to talk about it, shows how good of a job he did. And because he did such a good job, I just put this story at a higher level than, you know, if I just really didn't like it, I wouldn't even care to like talk about it. Like, oh, whatever, move along. But because this one is really good, I want to talk about it. And I want to know more about the world. And I want to know what's next. I think Solo Leveling is a great example where, I don't know if this is like the right words, but it's like really good for how mid it is. Like it has all these issues, but it's so good. It nails down a few things so well that even though they have all these flaws, I kind of just excuse it because I really enjoyed reading it, and the journey following the character Junwoo was very enjoyable. So overall, I mean, I think Solo Leveling is fantastic. But man, I just feel like there's so much missed potential, which is the reason why I believe Solo Leveling is really a double-edged dagger. What made it great also brought it down, but it doesn't change the fact that it's great.